The meeting room on Galactic Confederation Station 6 was too cold for humans. Patrick Collins tried not to shiver as he reviewed his notes one last time. After 5 years of humanity being part of the Confederation, this was his first solo negotiation, and he couldn't mess it up. "Just stick to the script," said Susan Parker, his senior advisor. Her gray hair was pulled back tightly, and worry lines creased her forehead. The Vrekthar respect formality above all else. Patrick nodded. Mining rights for one small planet should be straightforward. Susan's laugh held no humor. Nothing is straightforward with the Vrekthar Empire. The doors slid open, and 3 Vrekthar diplomats entered. They stood nearly 7 feet tall with mottled green skin and bony ridges where eyebrows would be on a human. Their ceremonial armor clicked with each step. The Confederation mediator, a 4-armed Jiraxian named Telex, waved his upper limbs. "All parties are present. We may begin negotiations for mining rights to planet TS-349. Patrick rose and gave the formal bow taught in his diplomatic training. "The United Earth Government extends greetings to the honored representatives of the Vrekthar Empire. We hope these talks will benefit both our peoples." The lead Vrekthar, Ambassador Drakmor, did not return the bow. His yellow eyes narrowed. "We question why primitives believe they deserve any share of these resources." The translator implant in Patrick's ear couldn't be working right. He glanced at Susan, whose face had gone pale. "Perhaps there is a misunderstanding," Patrick said carefully. "Earth has claimed rights under Confederation Charter, Section 12, as we were first to file proper survey documentation." Drakmor made a sound like rocks grinding together. The translation came through as laughter. "Documentation. Paper claims. The Vrekthar Empire has patrolled this sector for 3 centuries. Your species was still burning coal when we mapped these stars." Patrick felt heat rising in his neck. He had been warned about Vrekthar arrogance, but this was beyond diplomatic rudeness. "Ambassador, with respect, legal precedent in the Confederation favors documented claims over historical presence. We're willing to discuss shared access." "Humans have no place in space," Drakmor interrupted. "Your weak bodies, your soft technology. You survive only because greater powers allow it." The Jiraxian mediator shifted uncomfortably. "Ambassador Drakmor, such personal comments are not appropriate for." "No," Patrick said, standing straighter. "Let him speak. I want to hear why the mighty Vrekthar feel threatened by newcomers." Susan kicked him under the table, but it was too late. The room went eerily quiet. All 3 Vrekthar had gone still, their breathing visibly changing rhythm. Drakmor slowly turned his massive head toward Patrick. "You suggest the Empire fears humans." Patrick knew he should back down, but something in him refused. 5 years of subtle insults toward humanity in every Confederation meeting. 5 years of being treated as children who didn't belong. "I suggest that dismissing us without cause shows poor judgment, Ambassador. Humanity has earned its place here." The Vrekthar delegation began making low humming sounds, vibrating their throat sacs. The translator couldn't keep up with their rapid exchanges. Finally, Drakmor stepped forward. "Human diplomat Patrick Collins has issued challenge under Ordinance of Krevat. As is our right, we accept." The Jiraxian mediator's 4 arms all rose in alarm. "Surely there is a misunderstanding." Human diplomat Collins could not have intended. "What challenge?" Patrick asked, confusion replacing his anger. Susan grabbed his arm, whispering urgently. "Vrekthar culture treats any questioning of their courage as a formal challenge to combat. You just accidentally challenged them to ritual battle." Patrick's stomach dropped. "That's ridiculous. I'm a diplomat, not a warrior." Drakmor's lipless mouth curved upward. "Combat will occur in 14 standard days, champion against champion, to settle all claims to planet TS-349. He turned to his colleagues. "Humans talk boldly. Now we will see if they can fight with equal skill." As the Vrekthar delegation left, Patrick stood frozen, realizing what he had done. In one moment of pride, He had committed humanity to a battle they couldn't possibly win. Susan looked at him with a mixture of anger and fear. We need to contact Earth immediately, and God help us find a champion in 2 weeks. Nancy Rodriguez wiped sweat from her forehead as she finished her morning run along the California coastline. The ocean breeze felt good against her skin. 3 years since leaving the Marines, and civilian life still felt strange. Peaceful, but strange. Her wristcom buzzed. Nancy frowned at the government ID code. She hadn't heard from her old bosses since the discharge ceremony. Rodriguez, she answered. Former Marine Captain Nancy Rodriguez. The voice was clipped, urgent. That's me. Who's asking? This is Jack Miller, Diplomatic Security Corps. You need to come in. Government transport is already on the way to your location. Nancy stopped walking. I'm not in the service anymore. Whatever it is, find someone else. This comes from the top. It's about the Vrekthar situation. The line went silent. Nancy stared at her wristcom. The Vrekthar. The only aliens who had ever made her feel truly afraid during her service years. 20 minutes later, a sleek government flyer landed on the beach. Nancy had just enough time to shower and change into simple civilian clothes. As she boarded, she noticed the hurried looks of the crew. The flyer took her to Washington, D.C., where more serious-faced officials led her to an underground conference room. Inside sat a group of worried-looking people around a large table. Captain Rodriguez, thank you for coming, said a tall man with a white beard. I'm Alan Foster, Secretary of Interstellar Affairs. Nancy nodded. Not a captain anymore, sir. Just Nancy. A younger man stood up. His tie was loose and his eyes were red. I'm Patrick Collins. This is all my fault. For the next 10 minutes, Patrick explained what had happened on the space station, how he had accidentally challenged the Vrekthar to ritual combat, how Earth now needed a champion. Nancy shook her head. Why me? There must be better fighters. A woman slid a tablet across the table. Your record from the Ta City incident. Nancy winced. 3 years ago, her small Marine unit had been attacked by alien pirates. She was the only survivor, holding off 20 attackers for 6 hours until rescue arrived. The official report called it a miracle. Nancy called it the worst day of her life. We need someone who's faced aliens in combat and won, Secretary Foster said. That list is very short. The Vrekthar champion will be twice your strength, warned a thin man with glasses who introduced himself as Dr. Paul Edwards, xenobiology expert. They're evolved from apex predators and have natural armor. Nancy looked around the room. So you want me to fight a creature that's stronger, bigger, and literally built for combat? To save a diplomatic mess over mining rights? Patrick Collins looked down. It's more than that now. If we back out, we lose all respect in the Confederation. Many species already think humans are too weak for space. Secretary Foster nodded. This has become a test of humanity itself. If we fail, we could find ourselves isolated, vulnerable. Nancy turned away, walking to the window. Below, people walked through the city, unaware that their future was being decided in this room. What happens if I say no? She asked. We find someone else, Foster said. Someone with less chance of surviving. Nancy closed her eyes. She had promised herself never to fight again after Ta City. The nightmares had just started to fade. When does this happen? She asked. 12 days, Patrick said. The combat takes place on Neutral Station 7. And if I win, we get the mining rights, but more importantly, humanity gains respect, Foster explained. The Vrekthar have never lost one of these challenges. Nancy turned back to face them. I'll need to know everything about these Vrekthar. Their weaknesses, their fighting style, everything. Patrick's face showed relief. Does this mean you'll do it? Nancy didn't answer immediately. She thought of her peaceful mornings by the ocean. Then she thought of Earth, alone and unprotected in a dangerous galaxy. Get me transport to the station, she said finally. and find me someone who knows how these fights work." As the room burst into activity, Nancy wondered if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Neutral Station 7 hung in space like a giant metal flower, its petals extending outward to catch the light of nearby stars. Nancy pressed her hand against the viewport as their shuttle approached. 10 days until the combat, and her stomach was already in knots. "First time at a Confederation station?" asked Keith Dawson. The xenobiologist had been assigned to help her prepare. Nancy nodded. "I served on human ships. Never got to see the fancy alien ones. This was built by the Juraxians. They try to make everyone feel at home, but the gravity might feel strange to you in some sections." Their shuttle docked smoothly. As they stepped through the airlock, Nancy felt the difference immediately. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth normal, making her feel bouncy with each step. "Our quarters are in the human section," Keith explained, "but the training areas are set up to match Vrekthar conditions." A small group waited for them. Patrick Collins looked even more tired than when Nancy had seen him on Earth. Beside him stood a woman with short blonde hair who introduced herself as Susan Parker, Patrick's advisor. "The Vrekthar delegation arrived yesterday," Susan said. "They'd been parading their champion around the station." "I want to see him," Nancy said. Keith frowned. "That might not be wise. You need to prepare." "I need to know what I'm facing," Nancy cut him off. "No videos or descriptions. I want to see him in person." They led her through winding corridors. The station was filled with aliens of all shapes and sizes. Some looked almost human, while others were so strange Nancy couldn't tell which part was the face. Many stopped to stare at her as she passed. "They've all heard about the challenge," Patrick explained. "Nothing like this has happened in decades, a human taking on a Vrekthar in ritual combat." "Great," Nancy muttered. "No pressure." They entered a large open area that seemed to be a common gathering place. Food vendors from various worlds lined the walls, and in the center was a circular seating area. There, Susan pointed. Nancy's breath caught. The Vrekthar champion stood head and shoulders above everyone around him. His green skin was darker than the other Vrekthar, with more pronounced ridge patterns. Muscles rippled as he moved, demonstrating combat moves to an admiring crowd. "That's Krozul," Keith whispered, undefeated in 17 challenges. Nancy watched Krozul's movements carefully. He was strong, no doubt about that. But there was something else, a rhythm to his fighting style that seemed almost ritualistic. "Take me to where I'll be training," Nancy said. "I need to get started now." Back in the human section, Keith showed her to a modified gym. "I've set this up based on what we know of Vrekthar combat styles." For hours, Nancy studied the information they had. The Vrekthar fought with a combination of strikes and grappling moves. Their thick skin made them resistant to blunt force, and their size gave them reach advantages. "I can't match his strength," Nancy said, watching recordings of previous challenges. "No human could." "Then you need a different approach," came a voice from the doorway. A woman with red hair and a scar across her cheek leaned against the wall. She wore the patch of a free trader on her jacket. "Who are you?" Nancy asked. "Lisa Bennett. I run supplies between Earth and the frontier colonies, and I've seen Vrekthar fight before." Keith looked surprised. "How?" Lisa smiled. "Not all my business is strictly official. Let's just say I've been places most diplomats haven't." Nancy gestured for her to continue. "Vrekthar have 3 weaknesses," Lisa said. "Their eyes are sensitive to certain light frequencies. Their joints, especially the knee equivalents, aren't protected by their natural armor. And they're arrogant. They never expect to lose. The rules forbid weapons," Keith pointed out. "But they don't forbid tactics," Lisa countered. She pulled out a small data chip, combat recordings the official channels don't have. "Study these, and I might be able to help with some special equipment that stays within the rules." Nancy took the chip, feeling the first spark of hope since accepting this mission. "Why help me?" she asked. Lisa's face hardened. Because some of us are tired of the Vrekthar bullying every new species that joins the Confederation. It's time someone taught them a lesson. As Lisa left, Nancy turned to Keith. I'm going to need everything you know about Vrekthar physiology. Every detail. For the first time since arriving, Nancy felt a plan forming. She might not be stronger, but humans had always been good at finding another way to win. Nancy woke early on her third day at the space station. She had spent most of her time studying the Vrekthar and practicing in the modified gym. Her muscles ached, but her mind felt clearer than it had since accepting this mission. As she finished her morning exercises, a message came through. Several Confederation diplomats wanted to meet with her. Nancy wasn't sure if that was a good sign. The meeting room was designed to accommodate many different species. Some chairs were tall and narrow, others wide and low. Nancy chose a simple human-style seat and waited. 5 aliens entered, each from a different world. Nancy recognized the Juraxian mediator, Telex, with his 4 arms. The others were new to her. A tall, thin being with blue skin, a short, furry creature with large eyes, a reptilian alien with scales that shifted colors, and a being that looked almost human except for the silver patterns on its face. Human champion, Telex began. We come as neutral observers of the upcoming combat. The blue alien spoke next. I am Zinla of the Perlian Council. We wish to offer advice. What kind of advice? Nancy asked. The furry alien stepped forward. Withdraw from the challenge. The Vrekthar champion has never been defeated. You face certain injury, possibly death. Nancy blinked in surprise. You want me to quit? It would be the logical choice, said the reptilian being. The Vrekthar would claim victory but might show mercy in how they exercise their rights to the disputed planet. Nancy looked at each alien carefully. Something felt off about this meeting. If you're neutral observers, why are you advising me at all? The silver-faced being made a sound like gentle wind chimes. We have seen many challenges. None end well for the challenger against Vrekthar champions. Thank you for your concern, Nancy said carefully. I'll consider your advice. After they left, Nancy sought out Keith in the research area. He was studying Vrekthar biological data. 5 diplomats just told me to withdraw, Nancy said. Keith looked up sharply. Which species? When Nancy described them, Keith frowned. The Perlians and Sathi both lost territories to Vrekthar challenges. The others have treaties that favor the Vrekthar. So they're not exactly neutral. Not even close. Keith closed his data screen. Many species in the Confederation fear the Vrekthar. Some have learned to survive by staying on their good side. Nancy considered this new information. They seemed almost desperate for me to quit. Because if a human actually won, Keith didn't finish the thought. Later that day, Nancy decided to eat in the station's common area instead of the human section. She wanted to observe other species to understand the complex politics at play. She had just started her meal when a shadow fell across her table. Looking up, she found herself staring at Krazul. The Vrekthar champion was even more imposing up close. Human fighter, he said, his voice surprisingly smooth. I wish to see you before our combat. Several nearby aliens stopped eating to watch. Nancy noticed how they tensed, some even backing away. Have a seat, Nancy said, gesturing to the chair across from her. Though it might be small for you. Krazul seemed surprised by the invitation, but carefully lowered himself onto the reinforced chair. You are not afraid, he observed. Most opponents show fear. Being afraid doesn't help me, Nancy replied. And I'm curious about something. What does strength mean to the Vrekthar? Krazul tilted his massive head. Strength is power, the ability to overcome all obstacles. In human culture, strength has many forms, Nancy said. Physical power is just one kind. We also value mental strength, emotional strength, moral strength. Words to comfort the weak, Krazul dismissed. Nancy leaned forward. Is it weakness that let humans go from stone tools to space travel in less than 10,000 years? Is it weakness that let us survive on a planet with predators stronger and faster than us? For the first time, Kruzul seemed unsure how to respond. Humans don't win because we're the strongest, Nancy continued. We win because we adapt. That's our strength. Before Kruzul could answer, a message came through the station's announcement system. The Vrekthar Emperor himself would attend the combat. The stakes had just gotten higher. As Kruzul left, Nancy noticed something in his eyes she hadn't expected: curiosity. Maybe, just maybe, she had planted a seed of doubt in the mighty warrior's mind. Nancy couldn't sleep. Tomorrow she would face Kruzul in the arena, and her mind raced with both fear and preparation. She paced her quarters, going over her strategy again and again. A soft knock on her door broke her concentration. She opened it to find Patrick standing there, his face even more worried than usual. "You should be resting," he said. "So should you." Nancy stepped back to let him in. "What's wrong?" Patrick handed her a small datapad. This came through unofficial channels. Daniel Carter from Intelligence sent it. Nancy scanned the message. "This says the whole situation was set up, that someone wanted a human to challenge the Vrekthar. It looks that way. Some members of the Confederation don't want humans to have a strong voice. What better way to put us in our place than a humiliating defeat?" Nancy set the pad down. They picked the wrong human to humiliate. Patrick looked at her with concern. "Nancy, no one would blame you if you withdrew. This isn't fair. Life isn't fair. Space definitely isn't fair." Nancy crossed her arms. "I'm not backing down now." After Patrick left, Nancy returned to the training room. She set the gravity to match the arena conditions and practiced her movements. The modified suit Lisa had brought her felt strange, but would give her advantages the Vrekthar wouldn't expect. The door slid open, and Gloria Winters, the human ambassador to the Confederation, entered. Her gray suit looked as crisp as if it were morning, not the middle of the night cycle. "Captain Rodriguez," she said formally, "I thought I might find you here." Nancy continued her exercises. "Just Nancy now. What can I do for you, Ambassador? You can understand what's really at stake tomorrow." Gloria moved closer, her voice lowering. 17 species are watching this combat closely. Many of them have suffered under Vrekthar influence for decades. "So I've heard. What you may not have heard is that they're considering forming new alliances. They're looking for a species with the courage to stand up to the stronger powers." Nancy stopped her exercise. "You're saying this isn't just about mining rights or even human pride. I'm saying tomorrow could change the balance of power in the Confederation." Gloria's eyes were intense. "No pressure." Nancy laughed despite herself. "Right. No pressure." After the ambassador left, Nancy recorded a message for her parents back on Earth. She kept it light, saying only that she was on an important mission. No need to worry them with the details. As she finished, Lisa burst into the room, a large case in her hands. "Good, you're awake," Lisa said. "I have your gear. Had to call in every favor I was owed to get it through security." She opened the case to reveal the completed combat suit. It looked simple from the outside, thin and flexible, conforming to Confederation rules about non-weapon gear. But Nancy knew what was hidden inside: gravity compensators, impact distribution weave, and sensory enhancers that would help her spot Vrekthar weak points. "It's perfect," Nancy said, running her hand over the material. "It better be. Cost me a small fortune." Lisa closed the case. "Just make it worth my investment by winning tomorrow." The station's public announcement system chimed, indicating 6 hours until morning cycle. 6 hours until the combat. Nancy was about to respond when alarms began blaring throughout the station. The lights dimmed to emergency levels. "What's happening?" she asked. Lisa rushed to the door, looking out into the corridor. "Trouble. Looks like the Vrekthar ceremonial procession is moving through the station." So, that was scheduled. Not through the human section, it wasn't. Lisa grimaced, and from the sounds, I'd say they've run into some human supporters who don't appreciate the intimidation tactic. Nancy grabbed her jacket. We need to stop this before it gets out of hand. As they ran toward the commotion, Nancy could hear shouting in both human and Vrekthar languages. The last thing she needed was a diplomatic incident hours before the combat. Tomorrow would bring enough battles. She didn't need one to start tonight. The arena was larger than Nancy expected. A circular space about 50 yards across, with walls rising 10 feet high before the seating began. The floor was divided into sections with different surfaces, some metal, some like sand, others with strange rubbery material Nancy couldn't identify. Each surface has different properties, Keith explained as they walked the perimeter during the pre-combat inspection. Some will be harder for the Vrekthar to move on, others will favor them. Nancy nodded, making mental notes of which sections might give her an advantage. The gravity also varied slightly throughout the arena, another factor she would need to use. The stands were filling rapidly. Beings from dozens of species took their seats, their voices creating a constant hum of excitement. Nancy spotted several groups of humans, including station staff and diplomats who had traveled from Earth. They looked nervous but determined to show support. The rules are simple, a Juraxian official explained to both Nancy and the Vrekthar representatives. Victory by submission, incapacitation, or surrender. No weapons. Combat gear must be approved. He gestured to Nancy's suit. Your equipment has been inspected and approved. The Vrekthar nodded curtly. Nancy saw Krazul standing behind them, his massive frame covered in traditional battle armor that left his arms and legs mostly exposed. He looked even more intimidating up close. You have 1 hour to prepare, the official concluded. Then we begin. Back in the preparation room, Nancy sat quietly while Keith reviewed their strategy one last time. Remember, you can't match his strength, Keith said. Use the arena layout. Make him work to catch you. I know, Nancy replied. She felt strangely calm now that the moment was almost here. Patrick entered, his face pale. Nancy, I'm so sorry for putting you in this position. She shook her head. You didn't put me anywhere. I chose this. A chime sounded, indicating 30 minutes until combat. Nancy stood and began her final stretches. The Vrekthar Emperor has arrived, Patrick said, his voice low. He's watching from the Imperial box. Nancy felt a flutter of nervousness. No pressure, right? The final preparations passed quickly. Before she knew it, Nancy was walking through the tunnel toward the arena, the sound of the crowd growing louder with each step. As she emerged into the bright lights, a section of humans cheered. The rest of the crowd murmured, many clearly surprised by her small stature compared to the typical champions in these events. From the opposite tunnel came Krazul. The Vrekthar stands erupted in thunderous approval as he raised his arms, showing off his impressive physique. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, he towered over Nancy. The Juraxian announcer spoke, his words translated through the station's systems. Today we witnessed the resolution of a formal challenge between the Vrekthar Empire and the United Earth Government. Champions will fight under the sacred rules of Krivat. Nancy and Krazul were directed to the center circle. Up close, she could see the texture of his green skin, like fine scales covering powerful muscles. You are brave to show up, human, Krazul said, his voice surprisingly soft for his size. Many would have found a way to withdraw with honor. I'm not here for honor, Nancy replied. I'm here to win. Krazul's mouth stretched in what might have been a smile. Impossible, but your spirit is admirable. The signal to begin came with a sharp tone. Krazul wasted no time, lunging forward with surprising speed. Nancy ducked and rolled away, using the different gravity section to propel herself further than the Vrekthar expected. The first minutes of combat went poorly for Nancy. Though she avoided direct hits, Krazul cornered her against the arena wall and landed a glancing blow that sent her sprawling. Pain shot through her shoulder, but she scrambled back to her feet. The crowd's reaction was mixed, some cheering Krazul's dominance, others showing concern at the apparent mismatch. As the first round ended, Nancy returned to her corner where Keith waited. "He's stronger than we thought," Keith said, examining her shoulder. Nancy nodded, catching her breath. "But he has patterns. He always moves right before striking, and he doesn't like the low-gravity sections." Keith's eyes lit up. "You noticed that too. Use it. Make him follow you there." As the second round began, Nancy felt a shift in her thinking. She stopped seeing Krazul as an invincible opponent and started seeing him as a puzzle to solve. And Nancy had always been good at puzzles. Nancy moved differently in the second round. Instead of trying to match Krazul's power, she became like water, flowing around his attacks. The crowd noticed the change immediately. "What is she doing?" Patrick asked, watching from the human section. Keith smiled slightly. "She's fighting like a human, not like a Vrekthar." Nancy darted between the arena's sections, never staying in one place long enough for Krazul to set up a powerful attack. She used the low-gravity areas to leap over him, making the larger fighter turn constantly. With each turn, his movements became less fluid. "She's making him dizzy," Lisa observed from her seat near Patrick. "Smart." Krazul grew frustrated. His attacks became wilder, less controlled. Nancy took advantage of this, sliding under a wide swing to land her first solid blow to the back of his knee joint. The Vrekthar stumbled, causing a hush to fall over his supporters. In the Imperial box, the Vrekthar Emperor leaned forward, his four-fingered hands gripping the railing. This was not going as expected. The second round ended with Nancy still on her feet and Krazul breathing heavily. As she returned to her corner, she noticed something surprising. Aliens from several species were now openly cheering for her. "You've got him worried," Keith said, handing her water. "But be careful. Worried Vrekthar are dangerous Vrekthar." Nancy nodded, her focus intense. "The suit's working perfectly. I barely felt that last hit he landed." "Your shoulder." "Still hurts, but I can work around it." The third round began with Krazul changing tactics. Instead of chasing Nancy, he stood in the center of the arena, challenging her to come to him. "He's conserving energy," Keith muttered. "Dangerous." Nancy circled Krazul cautiously. She needed to draw him out again, make him move. An idea formed. She stepped onto the metal section of the floor and deliberately turned her back for just a second. The provocation worked. Krazul charged, his heavy footsteps vibrating the metal surface. Nancy waited until the last possible moment, then dropped flat. The Vrekthar, unable to stop his momentum, stumbled over her and crashed into the arena wall. The human section erupted in cheers. Even some Vrekthar looked impressed by the tactic. "The human is cunning," the Emperor commented to his advisors. "She fights with her mind, not just her body." Krazul rose slowly, green blood trickling from a cut on his face. His yellow eyes narrowed with new respect and new anger. "You fight without honor," he growled at Nancy. "I fight to win," she replied, staying light on her feet. "There's honor in that." The combat continued with Nancy gradually wearing down her larger opponent. She used the arena environment brilliantly, fighting in sections that favored her mobility and drawing Krazul into positions that neutralized his strength advantage. By the fifth round, many in the audience who had come expecting a quick and brutal defeat of the human were now standing, captivated by the display of strategy over power. Nancy wasn't without injuries. A heavy blow had caught her ribs, making each breath painful. But Krazul was slowing, his movements becoming predictable. During a clinch against the wall, Krazul whispered, "You cannot win, human. I have never been defeated." Nancy pushed away, circling again. "There's a first time for everything." The next exchange changed everything. Frustrated by Nancy's evasions, Krazul grabbed a handful of the rubbery floor covering and flung it at Nancy's face, a clear violation of the rules. Gasps echoed through the arena. The Jiraxian officials moved to intervene, but before they could, Nancy had already reacted. Instead of calling foul, she ducked under the projectile and executed a perfect sweep to Krozul's legs, sending him crashing to the ground. The Vrekthar spectators fell silent. Their champion had broken the sacred rules of combat, yet the human continued to fight with honor. In the Imperial box, the Emperor stood. His expression was unreadable, but his attention was now fully on the small human fighter who had just shown more honor than his own champion. As Krozul rose, shame visible on his alien features, Nancy prepared for the final round. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe she might actually win. The final round began with a different energy in the arena. Nancy no longer felt like the underdog. She had proven she belonged here, and the crowd knew it. Krozul approached the center, his head slightly bowed. "You fight with honor, human. I did not expect this." "Maybe you should learn more about humans before judging us," Nancy replied. They circled each other, both injured but determined. Nancy's ribs ached with each breath, while Krozul favored his right leg where she had struck the joint repeatedly. Nancy had saved her best strategy for last. She moved to the section with the highest gravity, where Krozul's greater weight would work against him. Her suit's compensators would give her an edge here. "Why do you run to the hard section?" Krozul asked, following her slowly. "This only makes movement more difficult for both of us." Nancy didn't answer. She had spent hours practicing in this exact gravity during training. While it felt heavy to her, she had adapted. For Krozul, with his greater mass, it would be far worse. The Vrekthar attacked with a powerful but slower swing. Nancy ducked under it and struck at his already damaged knee. Krozul grunted in pain but caught her with a backhand that sent her rolling across the floor. Nancy tasted blood but rose quickly. She noticed Krozul was breathing harder, the high gravity taxing his system. She darted in, landed 3 quick strikes to vulnerable points Keith had identified, then retreated before he could counter. "Remarkable," the Emperor said to his advisors. "The human has turned Krozul's strength into a weakness." With each exchange, Krozul slowed further. His massive muscles, evolved for strength rather than endurance, burned precious oxygen in the high gravity. Nancy, smaller and now moving with practiced efficiency, conserved her energy. In the human section, Patrick could barely watch. "She's wearing him down," he whispered. "Just like she planned," Keith replied with a smile. "Humans aren't the strongest species, but we might be the most stubborn." The decisive moment came when Krozul lunged forward with his remaining strength. Nancy sidestepped, hooked her foot behind his damaged knee, and used his momentum to send him crashing down. Before he could rise, she applied a joint lock to his arm, bending it in a direction the Vrekthar anatomy couldn't tolerate. The arena went silent. No non-Vrekthar had ever put their champion in such a position. "Submit," Nancy said quietly. "Don't make me break it." For a long moment, Krozul struggled against the hold. Then, to the shock of everyone watching, he tapped the floor 3 times, the universal signal of submission. "I yield," he announced, his voice carrying through the silent arena. Nancy released him immediately and stepped back. She offered her hand, a human gesture of respect after combat. After a moment's hesitation, Krozul took it. The crowd erupted. Humans cheered wildly while other species joined in, many standing to applaud the unexpected outcome. In the Imperial box, the Vrekthar Emperor himself rose. The Jaraxian official entered the arena. "The combat is concluded. Victory to the human champion." As protocol demanded, Nancy and Patrick were brought before the Emperor to claim their prize, exclusive mining rights to planet TIS 349. But Patrick surprised everyone. "Your Imperial Majesty, the United Earth Government proposes an alternative. Instead of exclusive rights, we suggest a joint operation. Vrekthar expertise combined with human innovation. We believe both our peoples would benefit more from cooperation than competition." Murmurs spread through the crowd. No one had ever proposed such a thing after winning a challenge. The Emperor studied Patrick, then looked at Nancy, who stood tall despite her injuries. "Humans continue to surprise," he said finally. You win fairly, then offer partnership instead of taking your prize. He nodded slowly. The Vrekthar Empire accepts this proposal. As they left the arena, representatives from 17 different species approached them, requesting meetings with human diplomats. What just happened? Nancy asked, bewildered by the sudden attention. Ambassador Winters smiled. You just changed humanity's place in the galaxy. These species have been looking for someone with both the strength to stand up to bullies and the wisdom to choose cooperation over domination. Patrick nodded. They wanted to see if humans were different. Thanks to you, they believe we are. Nancy looked back at the arena where she had fought so hard. She had come to win a battle, but somehow had helped humanity win something much more important: respect.